Okay, so let's discuss the functional role of nucleus accumbens of a particular area that gets a lot of dopamine and plays a critical role in the decision making. So nucleus accumbens, this region is called quite often pleasure center of the brain in the popular literature. It's a critical region for the valuation process. So we will discuss today the role of nucleus accumbens and the role of orbitofrontal cortex. This area is closely connected to nucleus accumbens. But let's focus first on nucleus accumbens. This is a very important region for neuroeconomics. So don't be confused. Sometimes nucleus accumbens is called ventral striatum. That's basically the same region, but these two different labels are used because of historical reasons. So I indicate here nucleus accumbens by the red color, and I indicate on the bottom of this slide ventral striatum also by the red color. That basically is the same region, just second term is used because of the ventral location of this region in the striatum. So sometimes you will see the label nucleus accumbens, sometimes ventral striatum. That's basically the same region. So nucleus accumbens has a very important position in the brain. So this region gets information from hippocampus. This is a region related to our memory. It gets information from frontal cortex. This is a higher order cortex in our brain involved into the higher order decision making. It also gets an information from amygdala. This is another important region related to motivation. It also encodes potential costs of our decisions. It also gets dopamine from ventral tegmentum area and is closely related to the motor system. So this is a very nice position for an emotional computer that can link different areas of the brain during the decision making and calculate values for our decisions. So let's make a look to the activity of nucleus accumbens when animal touches reward. So in this case, each line represents one trial, and you see spikes produced by nucleus accumbens, by neurons in nucleus accumbens. So you see whenever animal touches reward, nucleus accumbens is activated. So it produces a lot of spikes. And when animal touches a metallic, for example, object with no reward values, these dopamine neurons, these nucleus accumbens neurons do not react. So we can suggest here that, okay, these neurons code rewarding values. So these neurons code values. If something has a value, these neurons react. But story is a bit more complicated. So let's make a look to the famous study conducted by Wolfram Schultz. He's a prominent neuroeconomist. So this study shows the reaction of nucleus accumbens to their Pavlovian conditioning. So here, as in standard Pavlovian conditioning experiment, a neutral stimulus, conditioned stimulus, is associated with reward. So at the beginning of the experiment, this neutral stimulus has no value, but during the conditioning process, it starts to predict rewards. So what do we see here? At the beginning of the conditioning process, dopamine neurons react to rewards. So when animal get reward, you see the bursts of activity. So these neurons produce a lot of spikes. But during the conditioning, this neuron stops to react to reward and starts to react to the conditioned stimulus, predicting reward. So in fact, this neuron doesn't code reward values, but it codes expected values. So with time, during the Pavlovian conditioning, conditioned stimulus start to be predictor of rewards. And dopamine neurons react to this predictor. So dopamine neurons actually code expected rewards. And this is a critical aspect of decision making. So let's make a look to another experiment measuring amount of dopamine released in nucleus accumbens at the beginning and at the end of the conditioning process. So at the beginning of the conditioning experiment, dopamine is released in the nucleus accumbens when animal gets reward. In the middle of the conditioning process, you see that this neuron starts to react to the conditioned stimuli that actually is predicting reward. And at the end of the conditioning process, this dopamine neuron exclusively react. So amount of dopamine exclusively react to the stimulus predicting rewards. So we see here a signal, a dopamine signal, an inflow of dopamine to nucleus accumbens related to the expectation of rewards. So it looks like nucleus accumbens codes our expected values, our expectations about certain options. So is the system related to some abnormalities in our behavior? For example, to our addiction to some drugs. So there was a hypothesis suggesting that certain drugs actually hijack dopamine system. The lesions of the nucleus accumbens can attenuate the effects of cocaine and of amphetamines. So it looks like dopamine is critical for the addiction, for the rewarding effects of cocaine and of amphetamines. But other drugs are related to other brain systems. For example, heroin addiction is related to other systems in the brain. But indeed, some addictions are related to dopamine system because drugs can hijack dopamine system and directly evoke some pleasant emotional reactions by manipulation of our valuation system. So for example, make a look here to these results. You see here the amount of dopamine in nucleus accumbens when an animal expects to get cocaine. So you see at the graph A, when animal is expecting to get a cocaine after a stimulus associated with cocaine, so there is a huge inflow of dopamine to nucleus accumbens. If the stimulus is not associated with cocaine, so there is no inflow of dopamine to the nucleus accumbens. So a reaction of the nucleus accumbens, inflow of dopamine to nucleus accumbens, is highly related to the expectation of reward, with our expectations of certain values related to our choice, to our decisions. So neuroeconomics theorem suggests that subjective value is nothing more but the average firing rate of certain populations of our brain. So whenever we make decisions, our certain brain areas are activated. They encode expected values of these decisions, and these values are encoded in the firing rate of our neurons. So how to investigate it, not just in the animal's brain, but, for example, in our brains? So Brian Knudsen suggested a very smart paradigm. So in this case, a subject is lying in a scanner, and subject is exposed to a certain task. So at the beginning of the trial, subject can see a queue. And you see here a queue with a number of horizontal lines. The number of lines here code the amount of money the subject can collect in this particular trial. So in this case, subject can collect $5. So subject sees a queue, and next she has to press the button during the presentation of the white square. So if subject makes the reaction in time, she can collect $5. If we will make a look inside of the brain, we will see that activity of the nucleus accumbens is proportional to the anticipated gain. So on the right side of this slide, you see the activity inside of the nucleus accumbens. It is particularly active when person expects to get $5. It is less active when person expects to get $1. And it is even less active when person expects to get $0. So activity of the ventral striatum of the nucleus accumbens is proportional to the anticipated gain. So here it is important to make a look to the timing of this activity. You see that actually activity of the ventral striatum is particularly strong during the anticipation of the outcome, before the actual outcomes. So nucleus accumbens codes expected values.